Mark's boots crunched on the frosty gravel as he steered the patrol truck up the narrow service road. The morning was cold and damp, fog spilling down from the ridge. He had been on countless rounds like this, but the silence today felt heavier. He reached for the radio clipped to his vest and pressed the button. Mark to base, this is Unit 3. Visibility low, no hikers spotted yet. Over. Jenna's voice came back through static. Copy, Unit 3. Watch your right side trail. Fresh bear tracks were reported yesterday evening. Over. Mark glanced at the damp earth outside his window. Even from the truck, he could see large imprints near the ditch. He muttered under his breath, "That's fresh all right." He pulled over, killed the engine, and stepped into the biting wind. His flashlight beam cut through the fog as he scanned the trail. The prints led uphill. The sound came first, a guttural moan that froze him in place. It wasn't the sound of an animal moving freely. It was strained, frantic. Mark hurried toward it, climbing rocks slick with dew until the fog opened up to a sharp drop. There she was, a massive grizzly clinging to a ledge, front claws scraping stone, back legs dangling. Pebbles trickled down the cliff with every desperate kick. His pulse spiked. He pressed the radio again, voice low but urgent. "Ethan, I need you at Ridge Point 7 now. I've got a bear about to slip off the face. Bring the kit." Over. Ethan's calm reply steadied him. "Copy that. 10 minutes out. Hold tight." 10 minutes was too long. The bear's body shuddered each time her claws lost grip. She let out a deep, strangled growl. Mark's training screamed at him not to get close, but instinct shoved him forward. He uncoiled the thick rope from his pack, fingers stiff with cold. He searched the rock face until he found a crack wide enough for a cam. He hammered it in, clipped the rope, and tugged hard to test it. Solid. He looped the free end around his forearm, crept to the very lip of the cliff, and lay flat on his stomach. The bear's eyes flashed up at him, wild, terrified, not trusting. For a second, he thought she might let go just to end the fight. "Easy, girl," he whispered, though the wind swallowed his words. He fashioned a loop, lowering it inch by inch. The rope swayed, brushing her shoulder. She flinched, almost lost her hold. Mark's throat went dry. He steadied the rope, guided it under her chest with slow movements. Miraculously, it caught. He clipped his own carabiner through the rope for backup and leaned back with all his weight. The line went taut. His boots dug into the stone, his shoulders burning as the rope cut against his sleeve. The bear grunted, jerking upward, claws scrambling for purchase. Each heave pulled her a fraction higher. Mark's heart hammered. He muttered to himself, "One more pull. Hold on. Just one more." The bear's head finally cleared the ledge. Her massive body slumped onto the flat stone, sides heaving, breath ragged. For a brief moment, relief surged through him. He had done it. But then he saw her eyes change. The fear that had frozen her seconds ago turned to something sharper. She wheeled her head toward him, lips peeling back, a guttural rumble building deep in her chest. Mark unclipped the loop from his harness, his hands trembling as the tension drained from the rope. His arms ached from the pull, his shoulders burning, but he barely noticed. The grizzly stood now on solid ground, chest heaving like a drumbeat, steam rolling off her flanks in the cold morning air. Each breath she drew rattled deep inside her chest, hot and ragged, echoing against the rock walls. For a brief instant, Mark thought she might collapse from exhaustion, that the rescue was done and he could step back. Instead, her head lifted sharply, her ears flattened, lips curling back to reveal long yellow teeth. A low growl spilled from her throat, vibrating the stone under his boots. "Easy," he whispered, barely more than breath, holding out one palm as he took a slow step backward. His boots scraped against loose gravel, the sound crackling in the silence, each movement too loud. The bear's eyes locked on him, pupils dark and wide, wild and sharp as glass. She took a slow, heavy step forward, claws rasping against the stone. Another growl rolled out of her chest, deeper now, longer, like a warning that patience was thinning. Mark's radio crackled suddenly, the sound harsh in the charged air. "Ethan here, less than a minute out. Where exactly are you?" Mark forced his throat to work, his voice steady despite his pounding heart. "Ridge Point 7, near the split boulder. Hurry." The grizzly twitched with nervous energy, head swinging, jaws parting in sharp snaps of teeth. Her body rippled with tension, a coiled spring about to break. She lunged half a step, stopping short, her claws gouging the rock as if testing the ground between them. Mark's heel struck a jagged rise behind him, and for a moment his balance teetered. He steadied himself with a quick breath, chest tight, heart beating like thunder in his ears. "Don't do this," he whispered again, knowing full well she couldn't understand, but desperate to fill the silence with something human. She lunged once more, harder, closer this time. His back smacked against the stone wall behind him, sharp edges tearing at his jacket and scraping skin. Pain jolted up his spine. He stumbled, dropping to the ground in reflex, throwing one arm up to shield his throat. The bear roared, the sound exploding across the ridge, closing the gap in a single bound. Mark's pulse hammered so violently he could barely hear anything else, his vision tunneling to the flash of fur and teeth. Then another sound cut through the chaos. "Stay down, Mark." Ethan's voice carried across the ridge as his boots pounded the rock. A split second later came the hiss of compressed air. The dart struck true, embedding high in the grizzly's shoulder. She spun with a furious snarl, jaws snapping at the stinging spot. But the chemical spread quickly through her system. Her lunges slowed, her head dipped, steps staggered. Mark scrambled backward on hands and boots, gasping for air, never taking his eyes off her. Her massive frame swayed as though caught between fight and collapse. She let out one last guttural moan that echoed through the canyon. Then her legs gave out. She toppled onto her side with a heavy thud, dust billowing from the ground. Her chest continued to rise and fall rapidly, but her eyes slid shut, and her body went still. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Ethan rushed forward, crouching beside Mark, gripping his shoulder. "You all right?" His voice was sharp, urgent, but laced with concern. Mark nodded, still sucking in air. "She would have gone over if I hadn't moved fast." "You should have waited." Ethan shot back immediately, anger cutting through his relief. "Protocol says we don't risk ourselves like that. We could have rigged a safer lift together." Mark shook his head, jaw set. 10 more minutes, and she was gone. I couldn't just stand here and watch her fall. Ethan dragged a hand down his face, sighing deeply, frustration mixing with weary relief. "Next time you call me sooner." That was too close, closer than either of us needed. Mark glanced toward the unconscious bear, lying still against the rock. His chest tightened with guilt and relief twisted together, a heavy knot. "We did save her," he said quietly. "That's what matters." Ethan didn't answer immediately, but his silence carried as much weight as words. His eyes stayed fixed on the bear, the dart protruding like a reminder of how fragile the balance had been. The radio came alive again, Jenna's voice sharp and insistent. "Attention units. We've just had a group of hikers set out on the same ridge trail near your position. You need to secure that area immediately. Over." Mark and Ethan locked eyes, both realizing in that instant that the danger was far from over, and the morning had only begun. Claire knelt beside the tranquilized grizzly, her medical kit spread open on the ground. The morning sun had burned through the fog, casting sharp light over the ridge. She placed 2 fingers gently against the animal's chest, counting under her breath. Her brow furrowed, but her voice stayed calm. Breathing steady, heart rate elevated, but not critical. "We're good for now." Mark hovered nearby, still shaken, his jacket torn at the shoulder. Ethan stood a few steps back, arms folded, keeping watch. Claire lifted one of the bear's paws, inspecting the pads. Small cuts, nothing deep. She cleaned them quickly with antiseptic and smoothed a thin layer of ointment before wrapping a light bandage around the worst spot. Mark crouched down. "Anything serious?" Claire shook her head. She stressed and scraped up, but nothing life-threatening. "The sedative will hold for another 20 minutes. After that, we'll need to move fast." The radio crackled with static. Jenna's voice carried urgency. "Hiker group has been turned around by patrol at the lower fork. No one heading up your way now. You're clear. Over." Mark exhaled in relief. "Copy that. Thanks." He and Ethan grabbed the temporary tape and warning signs from the truck. Together, they strung bright orange strips across the trail entrance and hammered in stakes with a portable mallet. A family of 4 hikers approached, surprised faces meeting the blockade. Ethan raised a hand. "Trail's closed. Bear activity up ahead. Not safe. You'll need to head back down." The father asked, "Is it dangerous right now?" Mark answered honestly. "One bear's been tranquilized for treatment." We need this ridge empty until she's clear. Please follow the lower trail. The family nodded, turning back without protest. Once they were gone, the two men leaned against the truck in silence. The weight of the morning pressed down. Ethan finally spoke. You took a hell of a risk back there. Mark stared at the ground. I know, but if I had waited, she would have gone over. That's the thing, Ethan said sharply. We're not supposed to gamble with our own lives. Protocol exists for a reason. Mark lifted his eyes, voice steady. And what about the reason we're here at all? To protect wildlife, even when it costs us sweat and fear. I couldn't just stand there. Ethan's jaw worked, but he didn't reply right away. Finally he muttered, next time, we do it together. No more lone hero stuff. Mark gave a tired nod. Deal. Claire interrupted, adjusting the tranquilizer gun on her lap. When she wakes, she'll be groggy. We need to guide her away from the cliffs, someplace safe, with minimal stress. You two will flank her. Keep noise low. Don't let her double back. Ethan asked, how do we know she won't come at us again? We don't, Claire admitted, her tone blunt but calm. But the sedative should dull her aggression. Distance and steady direction are our best tools. Now help me get her onto the tarp. They unfolded a heavy-duty canvas sheet beneath the bear, grunting as they shifted her weight. Even tranquilized, she was immense. Mark wiped sweat from his forehead, lungs burning. Together they positioned her so she could be dragged short distances if necessary. Claire packed up, then pulled out a small syringe. This is a mild painkiller. It'll ease her muscles when she wakes. She injected the dose quickly and disposed of the needle in a case. Her eyes flicked toward the forest. We've got one shot to do this clean. The radio buzzed again, this time with a different edge. Another set of tracks spotted half a mile east. Looks like a female with a cub. Over. Mark froze. Claire and Ethan exchanged glances. If the waking bear crossed paths with a mother and cub, the risk doubled. Ethan's voice was tight. We can't have them meeting out here. The three of them stood in silence for a beat, the unconscious grizzly breathing heavily between them, the decision looming. The sun dipped lower, painting the ridge in amber light. The tranquilizer's grip was loosening. The grizzly's ears flicked, her breath deeper, muscles twitching beneath her thick fur. Claire checked her watch, voice steady. She'll be on her feet in 5. We need her moving before she wakes fully. Ethan adjusted the portable shields they'd brought, light metal panels strapped to frames. He planted them along the slope as a guide, forming a narrow corridor leading away from the cliff. Mark stood at the rear, rope in hand, ready to keep distance but apply gentle pressure if the bear tried to turn back. Claire crouched near the animal, speaking low. When she rises, don't startle her. Give her path, keep movement forward. Noise only if she veers wrong. Understood? Mark and Ethan nodded. They had worked rescues before, but never with this much risk stacked. The forest around them was silent, even birds hushed. Somewhere east, another bear moved with a cub. The thought lingered heavy in Mark's chest. The grizzly groaned, eyes fluttering open. She shifted clumsily, legs stiff. Claire whispered, that's it, girl. Easy. Mark's knuckles whitened around the rope, but he stayed still. Ethan tapped his boot against a rock, a subtle sound. The bear's ears twitched toward the gap between the shields. She stumbled forward, claws dragging, then steadied. Each step gained strength. Claire gestured with her hand, slow and deliberate. Keep her focused. Ethan moved ahead, walking backward, his calm presence guiding her. Mark shadowed behind, every muscle braced. Halfway down the slope, the bear paused. Her nose lifted, catching scent on the breeze. Mark's pulse spiked. If she caught wind of the other female and cub, this could break. Claire shook her head firmly. Hold. Don't push. Just wait. The bear huffed, shook her massive body, and pressed onward into the guided path. Relief washed over them in a wave. She passed the last of the shields and entered the tree line, wobbling but steady. Claire raised a hand. Stop. They all froze, giving her space. She lumbered through the brush until only the rustle of leaves marked her presence. Then silence. Mark exhaled for what felt like the first time all day. He met Ethan's eyes. That could have gone 100 ways worse. Ethan gave a tired grin. Without backup and the dart, you wouldn't be standing. You know that, right? Mark nodded. Yeah, I do now. Claire packed her gear, her voice calm but firm. She's stable. She'll recover fully. We did our part. Now she needs distance from us. The three of them stood in the fading light, exhaustion written across their faces. The ridge, once tense with chaos, felt still again. Mark brushed dust from his sleeve, glancing back at the cliff edge they had fought so hard to keep her from. The radio crackled, Jenna's voice cutting through the quiet. Headquarters requests you and Ethan back at Ridge Point 7 tomorrow. They want assessment for permanent barriers. Over. Mark and Ethan exchanged a weary look. The day wasn't over, not really. Tomorrow would bring new decisions. A week later, the ridge looked entirely transformed. Where once the cliff edge had been bare and treacherous, now bright steel posts rose in even intervals. Heavy cables stretched taut between them with precise tension. Fresh warning signs faced outward at the trailhead, their bold red lettering standing out against the pale morning sky, impossible for hikers to miss. The raw stone where Mark had once laid flat on his stomach, rope biting into his gloves as he pulled with all his strength, was now shielded behind the barrier, a place no person or animal would stumble across again without warning. Mark leaned hard into the wrench, tightening a stubborn bolt until the steel groaned and settled. His hands were steady, but the memory of that day still pressed at the back of his mind, vivid and unrelenting. A few yards away, Ethan crouched at the far end of the barrier, pulling against the cables with measured force. Satisfied, he gave a short nod. Solid, he said simply, and though it was a single word, it carried the weight of relief, of closure. They walked the length of the barrier together, boots grinding against gravel, the new steel gleaming bright under the rising sun. It feels strange, Mark admitted after a long silence, his voice low, like sealing up the memory, as if we're placing it behind glass and locking it away. Ethan shook his head firmly, his tone grounded. No, it's not about shutting it away. It's about making sure no one else ever has to stand where you did. That's the real difference. They paused at the overlook, breathing in the vast valley stretched out beneath them. The slopes rolled with dense pines like endless green waves, the river glinting silver below, winding through the landscape as if nothing had ever disturbed it. Mark let his eyes trace the line of trees where the bear had disappeared a week earlier, slipping back into her wilderness. He wondered, almost against reason, if she remembered them, or if their presence had already been erased by instinct and time. The radio on his belt buzzed sharply, snapping him from thought. A short message from Claire scrolled across the small screen. Bear sighted on camera 6. Healthy gait, moving west, away from ridge. Attached was a grainy snapshot from the monitoring station. Even through the blur, the shape of the grizzly was clear, steady on her feet, her frame strong. No limp, no hesitation, no sign of trauma. Mark passed the device to Ethan, who studied it closely. She made it. Ethan released a long breath, his shoulders finally loosening. That's all I needed to know. That's the ending I was hoping for, the best we could ask. They stood there together for a long moment, saying nothing, letting the silence of the ridge carry what words could not. The air smelled sharp and clean, heavy with fresh sap and stone dust, a scent that only came after building something new into the land. Wind rattled through the cables with a low hum, like the voice of the barrier itself, a constant reminder of the responsibility embedded in every post and wire. The barrier was more than metal and warning signs. It was a promise, to people, to animals, to the wilderness itself. Mark placed his palm against the cold steel, leaving it there as though anchoring himself in the moment. You know, he said, sometimes courage isn't about hanging on to the very edge. It's about drawing a line so no one else gets close enough to fall. Ethan gave him a faint, tired smile. And it's about knowing when to walk away once the job's done. The first light of dawn spilled across the ridge, painting the peaks in warm gold. Birds stirred in the trees around them, their early calls weaving through the stillness. Mark lowered his hand, shoulders finally easing in a way they hadn't since that morning of fear and adrenaline. The fence stood tall between them and the drop, a quiet sentinel, its presence promising that the chaos of that day would not repeat. They gathered their tools slowly, neither man rushing the final task. Each step they took back down the trail felt lighter than the last, though the memory of what they had faced lingered like a shadow at their heels. Behind them, the barrier gleamed bright in the strengthening sun, steady against the wind. It stood as both shield and reminder, a silent guardian watching over the ridge, holding the line for all who might come after.